This is Critical Nonsense, our high-lowbrow show about culture, science, and tech. This week, I ask Joey about the genuine maybe.
Woo! I threw my wish in a well. This is what a Joey sounds like. And this is what an executive producer and Carly Rae Jepsen, Jess Vander, sounds like.
Hi, this is Jess. Don't ask me, I'll never tell. Also, again, 1 out of 50 musical references that I actually recognize. That's my general cadence. Is usually Joey starts with the song, and I don't know what it is, but sometimes I do. So here we are.
I don't even know how that thing happened, but at some point it's probably just that I have songs stuck in my head often, and then I would just be like singing whatever song it was. Now I feel obligated to find a song at the beginning for some reason that is like germane, if I can. In which case, this week it is germane. Call Me Maybe, the slap, the banger.
The slap. That's what the slap is in the zeitgeist.
Are you saying that Call Me Maybe doesn't slap? Because you would be wrong.
Wow,
Jess,
I would never suggest such a thing.
You have a question about maybes, right?
That is so true. Here we are. This last couple of weeks, what with some internal trainings at the company and some things just in life, I have been thinking a lot about the idea of maybe. And I think it is, in my mind, not just about the character trait of being open-minded, but it is specifically the behavior of being open-minded and practicing that when you are someone like me who wants to be that more, but has a really hard time with this concept that I have created for myself, which is called the genuine maybe. Not a sarcastic maybe, like maybe, but no, is like actually what you're thinking is like maybe, but probably not, is like the unspoken piece versus the genuine maybe, which is like, yeah, maybe. Right? The different tone makes such a big difference. And I feel that, maybe because of how I grew up and or whatever other factors might have gone into it, that for me, either I generally tend to exist in 2 states of behavior. One of I don't know at all, or I'm pretty certain it's this. And this limbo of the genuine maybe is so foreign because it's sort of a state of it's just comfort with uncertainty of like, I have not a lot of confidence, but for some reason I'm going to assert something aloud. And that state is what I would say something that I really associate with you. And not all the time. Sometimes you are a maybe, but probably not. And that also makes sense because of, some of the cases of our work and your experience and whatever. But I think this is a perfect question to ask you, Joey, of how do you summon the genuine maybe?
I think the answer to this question for me individually is that I'm always like working from the assumption that I might be wrong. And I try to express what I think, but leave room for that wrongness in the interactions that I'm having. You had sent me a chat yesterday in a conversation with this idea, and at the time I had no idea what you meant, and I think I have a better I was like what do you mean? And it was an example of someone asking if something is possible in like a particular software program, and they were saying, oh, can you do this thing? And I said, I can't, but maybe someone else knows the way. And in that moment, like, I'm not definitively certain that I've like gone through all of the settings and know that it can't be done. And turned out like someone else did know the capital T, capital W way.
Yep.
And so I think, the like being a person in the world, never mind like being a professional or being a leader, you have to make decisions based on like the data that you have available to you at any given moment. But I'm never going from the assumption that like I have certainty about almost anything. I was talking to someone yesterday and I was like, we were talking about conducting like research, like qual and quant and building studies. And I was like, the reality is like, you can look with skepticism at like any bit of research, but your option is never talk to someone or talk to someone and improve the amount of data that you have to make strategic decisions for a company. Like that seems better. But the idea of like being 100% certain, like you can be certain of gravity, and beyond that, like there's not a whole lot that you have 100% certainty of.
No, for sure. And maybe it's also just like different things being calibrated. There are multiple tracks at play here. One of them is the confidence interval, which I think we can agree there's like comparing the what we know to the vastness of what we don't know. There is always some amount of confidence interval of like, yeah, you might be wrong. But I think that is separate from how we should, whether we should, and then how strongly we should assert anything based on what we do know. So there's like a distinction there where it's like, yes, you could be corrected later on, but that doesn't mean even at a 80% confidence interval that I can't say, but it's probably this. Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Like it's interesting to there's the confidence interval of like how certain you are of a particular thing, but then there's also this sort of like individual personal threshold of how confident you need to feel to act. And so it's interesting to think about like, if you have to make a decision, like sometimes do you have to like delude yourself in order to come to a decision you feel comfortable with, of like, I'm pretty sure I've done this enough times or whatever, like the realistic like confidence that you have that you know all the answers versus the confidence that you need to feel in order to act, right? Like a statistical confidence interval is like different than your confidence in action threshold. You know what I mean? And I'm not sure how those like two things intersect. Like I feel in any given moment, if you told me I had to make a decision, like if it's forced, if I don't have the option to like go search for more things, I feel confident making a decision based on like whatever I'm working with. But like given the option, I'm always going to be like looking for more data. And I think that's where that like openness comes from, is like if you're super curious, then you're saying like, what if I'm wrong? Or, oh, I have another question. I didn't consider that thing. Like you can become more certain. You can sort of approach more true, capital T true, if you are sort of maintaining an openness. But as soon as you get to that like closed state of like, I know exactly how this thing works or this system functions or whatever, then all of a sudden you don't search for more data and like your confidence never changes, right?
Right. And at the same time, I think, colloquially or in conversation, it might be that like curiosity is a virtue. Like, it's always better to be curious, but I think you've already called out one instance of decisiveness where like curiosity can get in the way of being like, all right, but like based on what we've got, like, can we just make a call? Like, can we just make a move about it? Or like, even it could be wrong, but like, let's just go with this. There's also, I think, the space of like, if you are unsettled about something, but consensus has come to some conclusion, that it can upset whatever the team has decided or something like that, where you're like, I'm gonna double check that. It's like, okay, so do you not trust the conclusion that we've made? Because you're like, I still have this like itching feeling or this like sinking sensation that like maybe there's something else. And at the same time, you know, I like it's interesting because then the reason that curiosity is such a virtue is because the sort of aha like discoveries or like challenging the status quo like comes from that one person with the sinking feeling. And it just, I don't know, it's maybe this is the part that's tricky, is because that genuine maybe feels so it feels like it is an objectively better way to be, and yet I, as someone who does not feel as comfortable in that zone, I'm like, come on, what about the people like me who are more of the probably not people? Like, is there, do we have anything, or are we just worse?
Yeah, I mean, it like that question of like, how do you contend with a genuine maybe, right? Because like the idea of like getting to like, that might be possible, and then just like doing what you are already doing, it is like a different way to approach it versus, you know, I think sometimes I have a weird relationship with competitiveness. Like I don't think I'm like super, like individually competitive in like games or things like that, or I'm like seeking out competition. But when someone says like a thing is not possible, it like triggers something. Like maybe maybe it's like being told what to do, where like you're saying like you can't do this, it's impossible.
Right.
And I'm like,
right.
Why are you saying that? Like, what if it actually is possible? You know, and like there are like dumb instances of it where I'm like, oh, someone's like, you can't do that in
you're like
Excel,
wow.
right? And I'm like, what? You can't, like I can,
right?
You know,
just watch. Okay, I'll be the judge of that.
Yeah,
right?
and
it's like that. It's that idea of like, no.
Yeah, like figuring out something that someone said like can't be done is thrilling in a way that like I don't feel like whatever playing basketball or football or like sports that I play, wrestling, whatever, of like I always wanted to win, but I was never like my like individual happiness didn't hang a ton on those outcomes. Whereas like I can get such a thrill where even if it's not someone who's speaking to me, but someone's like, this isn't possible to do. And I'm like, I'll figure it out. Like, you know, like, and when I do, even if no one else knows about it, just me, like I can still have that like thrill of like, I solved this thing.
Yeah. I know that in you and in other people. It is very familiar. It is not something that I like. I'll prove it wrong is one thing, but it's not even just that. It's just like someone's creating a constraint and it's like, don't like, no. What if we go beyond that constraint? Like, let us go outside of that, you know, metaphorical box that you've now put me in. Like, I refuse.
Is the genuine maybe difficult for you because of like your orientation to like rules and order? Is because you're confronting a situation with no rules. Yeah.
It's almost the Newtonian equal and opposite need for a box or the rejection of box. And I think that's why I'm like I'm stuck on this idea of, maybe it's not that the genuine maybe is in opposition to the maybe but probably not. It's almost like there's a more extreme version that it feels too out of reach of like always maybe that it's like that you can't, that there like it can't be any amount of conclusion, or just like this is just, we're doing this, just put this just the way and it's just gonna be that way.
How do you, in that same way, like how do you deal with we talked at one point of the idea of like viewquakes, where you think the rules are a certain way. And, like the older we get, the more experience we have, we encounter those situations less frequently, I think. Although there are certainly types of people who are like seeking that out as like a form of like intellectual thrill seeking almost. But like, how do you, when you think the rules are a certain way and when like the game in sort of like a game theory way is disrupted, like how do you contend with, oh, the rules just change, I just realized that I'm actually like operating with a different set of rules than I thought I did?
It almost, are you saying that is more of the like, if you find out you're wrong moment? Because that feels different to me than the moment of consideration, right?
Well, I guess it's like in that moment of genuine maybe, like you're in this sort of like wave function. You're like, it could be right, it could be wrong, I don't know, but I have to sort of like operate. I have to choose a course of action on the genuine maybe of like, am I going to pursue it or am I going to operate with the set of rules that like I'm already operating with? And so in that way, it seems like sort of a pushback against like chances or situations where the rules of the game change. And so like I was curious when and maybe it does fit in that like I find out I'm wrong type of moment, but it feels maybe a little bit different because like every time you find out you're wrong doesn't necessarily mean like the rules changed. Maybe
right, exactly. It's like, oh, this just happened to be the 5% chance that I was wrong. It's like, oh, okay, but that's not as likely. Like, right. In fact, if anything, it's just like, that was just an off. that was just an off moment. Like, there's no critical mass of wrongnesses that then tip the scales of like, wow, my whole algorithm is off. Like, something is really wrong here. But maybe part of the reason I'm bringing this to the table today is because I feel like I'm on the precipice of a potential algorithm shift, like a view quake of is my calibration off or actually is that fine? I also think there's like, you can't have this conversation without, and maybe this is just the pattern of discussions we've been having recently, but also sort of like the gender norms of being assertive about what you think and like how like what is encouraged and what is not encouraged. Like, I think I am someone who has been fortunate enough or maybe to a fault of like being encouraged to have an opinion and like assert what I think. And many people don't have that natural instinct, but it's interesting, it is also, when you are someone with that proclivity, you have to gauge it because it affects other people, or maybe might be off or like delusional. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the openness too is like, do you internalize when you've been wrong enough to then like shift your behavior, right? I think having the sort of luck of being a somewhat intelligent person to where you're like young and you're doing school and it's like relatively easy and you're like you sort of build a false sense of confidence that like, oh, I'll always be right or I'll always do well, and you sort of encounter situations where you think you have an answer and like someone catches you or like tells you a thing and you're like, actually, that's not how that works at all. You know, like in those
Right.
moments, if you value like the truth, or if you value like rightness in some sort of like platonic sense,
Platonic ideal, right?
yeah, then the confrontation becomes like, what are the things you value as it relates to the maybe? Like, I'm much more interested in like knowing than being right, if that makes sense. Like, I want other people to know too. Like, still like a social creature and want to share and be like, did you know this thing? Or like, we thought it was this and it's actually that. Like, but like those moments where I find out I'm wrong are like actually exciting, provided that they're not like accompanied by like some sort of extreme
Shame,
social like embarrassment or chiding or whatever it is, you know?
Yeah. Well, right. And I think that's why like this is particularly challenging for me in areas where I feel like where I have internalized that the rightness is an identity attachment. Like to be wrong at this, like I would actually sometimes like if I find out that that's not right, then like that is like a demerit on my caliber as a strategist, as a cook, like these like things that I'm like, I am someone who like knows things. It's like an expertise almost. It's like if I don't know this, that challenges my sense of my own expertise as a person who like, yeah, in terms of what you value is like the thing I value is that like a sense of self as expert. And that is, I mean, in what you're saying is like the danger of that is then clinging so tightly when you're confronted with something that's just like not what we're seeing here. Sorry. They're like, or like maybe someone else has a better idea. But I guess like I know intellectually all of that. Like I know the dangers of this direction. I just feel still like, come on, there's gotta be a give and take in the like there has to be some way where this is not only a flaw of humanity kind, you know?
No, I don't think it like any of these things can't be sort of like inherently viewed as flaws, right? There are like contexts where certain character traits will benefit and contexts when certain character traits won't. And that's why like increasing your ability to be flexible will ultimately benefit you in more contexts. And so like but to say like being a decisive person or being someone who is confident in your assessment obviously is like highly valuable in many contexts. There may be like some contexts where if you are forced to have to be acting on your own assessment and judgment in rapid succession, where that won't be valuable, or like having a more sort of circumspect position or a more open position would like benefit you. But I think as much as we might say from sort of like a moral perspective, openness is like a positive attribute. I think that like moral openness is, I think, distinct from confidence in your interpretation or your understanding of a context that you're in. And so I think it's important to like distinguish those things, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I'm interested to think about some of those contexts. Like where has being open for you been the most valuable? And versus like in what contexts is the genuine maybe like not the right time?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are few things that I feel like are like 100% always true. Like I do think I'm a person who operates in like very context dependent approach to sort of reality and interacting with people. And so I think distinguishing like rightness being a preference sometimes versus rightness being like the capital T true type of thing is important. And so, when we're working with clients and you're dealing with like senior leaders and you're in agreement about a key idea, but you're in disagreement about like how to act upon that thing, like I can say in my head, like, I don't think that is right. Like, that's not the decision that I would make in this context, but also being open to the idea, like, right, we talked about it today, like equifinality, like there are different ways that we could achieve the same end. And maybe this is one of those ways that will fit better with whoever the people that are going to have to live with this on a day-to-day basis. Like I can't, in the same way, some of the work that we're doing on occasion is like, broadly strategically we're agreed on like what the ideas are, but then you're getting down to like fine tuning language and in sharing certain strategies with a company or with a team, right? And so at that point, I'm like, I don't like that word. I don't think it's right, but if you like it and it's doing the thing for you, like, okay, like you just kind of, that same idea of like complexity, like you're never going to have all of the data, right? It's like the reason why we can't predict weather models is because we can't account for every atom. And so like, because we don't know what every atom is doing, the model will be like, immediately pretty good, but as soon as you start moving out, you're just not accounting for enough data, and so you can't make appropriate predictions. And it feels like to me most things that we do in our day-to-day lives are like decisions that you're trying to like assess an action in a complex system as opposed to being like platonic ideal like right or wrong things,
Yeah. Right. And then, depending on what your priorities are, it's like, all right, well, then we're just going to completely let go of most of this, etc. I think what we're coming to, despite my pushes, is that the genuine maybe is the thing. We all just need to practice it more. Maybe that is also what is happening when I'm asking someone who is a natural, genuine maybeier. Like, of course you're going to say that it's good.
Yeah, so, I mean, am I natural? Like, I don't... the other part of it is, like, I just don't want to close the door that I could be wrong, right? Like, I kind of want someone to prove me wrong sometimes, like, again, gently and nicely and, like, not making me feel like a dummy in the process somehow, but I'm like, I don't know how to do it. Do you know? Can you figure it out? Like, if you do, tell me. Like, I want to know how to do that. And so, like, I also do have a feeling where I don't want to impact someone else's worldview with something that could be wrong inside my worldview.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just a generous, fluid way of looking at things. That sounds great. Well, that's great. That's cool.
Can you do a wrap-up corner of how you're going to embrace the genuine maybe?
I don't even know. Other than just this, like, slow onset viewquake of, like, I see the intellectual value of this. The practice of summoning the genuine maybe is very difficult when that is not your comfort, and when you want to be in the box, just like staying in the box, that's where the things go. You put it next to other boxes and you organize all your stuff, and that is just very, very good. It's just really difficult and has served me and other people like me very well in circumstances of decision making, of creating, following with social consensus of like, all right, this is what we're doing. That feels great. But that it also it is something still worth pursuing because it is a virtue. And that is so annoying. Is that where I land with this? God, genuine maybe is killing me.
I love the indignant, version of changing your perspective on something. It's such a good on you for going through this, but it's also funny to be indignantly changing the way that you think about something. It's
fine, I get it. It's better.
Fine.
In some
I'm
ways
going to my
be
room.
able to maybe use that.
Well, we did it.
Okay. Well, I'll keep you posted. We'll see how it goes.
Maybe.
Critical Nonsense is a Sylvain production.
Brought to you by The Genuine Maybes, coming to a concert venue near you with some incredible performance because it sounds like a band name. Moving on.
As always, we'd like to thank executive producer and definitely maybe Jess Vander.
Oh, thanks. We'd also like to thank sound engineer and call me maybe Alex Conte.
We'd like to thank our programming coordinator and always sometimes Les Jacobs.
And thanks to our production crew and rightly or wrongly, Sarah Gilbert and Nora Mestridge.
Can neither confirm nor deny that we would like to say, as always, thank you, Sorry, Ellen.
Thanks, Sorry.
Special thanks to
Noodles.
A person, an artiste that created unique emojis for parents. I saw them this week. They were funny. Things like the face that you make when you are waking up when you have a 5-year-old multiple times a night. I loved it. You're the best.
You're going to have to add that in the show notes. I'd also like to thank Priorities for always getting them in order.
Always getting them in order. Well, thank you, Jess.
Well, thanks, Joey.
This face is, I love you, but I also hate you. That's a face you make to children. Bedtime took 3 hours.
No.
All right. Goodbye.
Okay, bye.
Maybe.